Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Turbocharging Teams, the series that provides you with tips, tricks, and detailed information to help you get more from Microsoft Teams. So whether you're an IT pro or a power user or just a regular end user working with Teams, we're glad that you're here. My name is Dino Caputo, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin Kieller.
Yeah, well, hi there. So last time we talked about teams and channels and the options that you have and you should consider when you're setting up your team and channel structure. But of course, after you do that, teams and channels without content is pretty useless. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how you can master meaningful and marvelous messaging in Teams. And clearly, I love alliteration. So there you go.
Bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so if we're focusing on the conversations you'd have in a channel, you know, obviously at the bottom of the channel, you see a nice purple button that says New Conversation. So when you click it, wait for it, obviously you're going to create a new conversation. So, you know, that's really the start of everything great in terms of Teams conversations. And, you know, in typical Microsoft more fashion or approach, when you open a new message, you get a ton of different options. So you get a bunch of icons below the start a new conversation message, and you can do a bunch of things there. I think, you know, obviously we're encouraging you to check them all out. There's a lot of different options there, but most notably, what I like to use is the little A with the edit icon with the A, which symbol with the pen on it, I guess. Would give you the most options in terms of formatting your message, adding a subject. Like I find that to be the most usable, because often, you know, instead of just typing a message, you might want to prefix it with a subject so people know what you're going to be talking about, and then it creates a nice new thread with a subject. I don't know, Kevin, what are some of the ones that you like?
Well, so I guess the first thing is like you can just like do new conversation, type, hey, where do you want to go for lunch today, when we're allowed to go for lunch, and just hit enter, right? So you don't have to do any of that. So, but yeah, so that A with the pen on the far left, like that's the pathway to even more, to every icon that I feel like Microsoft just gave like 20 people, like go create something. But you know, the basic ones, you've got like the paperclip one, which is an attachment. That's obviously key. And then, for instance, when I do it, I mean, then you have, the next three, you've got like the emojis, the stickers, and the Giphies, unless, like in the last episode, we talked about how you could turn off all that fun stuff. So hopefully you didn't do that, but if you did that, then you won't get those. And then after that, you know, at least for me, there's all these things called messaging extensions. So then I got a whole bunch of other icons that I, quite frankly, had no idea what they were. But so depending on what messaging extensions you may have installed or somebody may have installed, you might have a whole bunch of other ones along the bottom. And we'll talk about the really important one on the far right, I don't know, I think it's a paper airplane. I think Slack did it first. So Microsoft like basically created one that looks very similar. That's kind of the send message, I guess. You know, it folds up the message in a paper airplane and sends it over to the person. But when you click on that A with the pencil or pen, then you get a whole bunch of other ones, and I would just say hover over them. Like most of them, like, you know, the typical bold, underlined, italics, those are figure out. Then there's a few other bizarro ones that I had no idea what they were. Some of them I guess, but hover over it with the mouse and you get a tooltip, right? But maybe, you know, and then there's some drop downs on the top of that, right? So maybe talk about some of those drop downs.
Yeah, like for example, an announcement.
Right.
You know, you can tag your message as an announcement, which does a few special things. So it puts the little megaphone icon in the top corner of the message, and you know, it signifies that, hey, this is more of a perhaps a company-wide announcement or something to do with
something at least you think is important.
Right. So it signifies the message is just something different than a normal message. And you know, I tend to see these used if perhaps if you're a software developer and there's a new feature you've released, you might use the announcement functionality for this. So it's just really meant to draw people's attention to this particular message. Of course, you can use the exclamation mark to mark it as important too, but the announcement just gives it even that much more power, presence in the channel.
Well, and with an announcement, you can put it has a heading and a subheading, and also you can put like a background image. So it really does stand out, right? Like if you're scrolling through these, the hundreds or thousands of messages, like it definitely does stand out.
It draws your attention to it for sure. Yeah. So, if you didn't read anything but announcements, then you're good. You're covered.
There you go. And then another drop down, so that's like on the far left. And then another thing you can do is, and I never do this, but I guess if you really want to, if you think you're really important, you want to spam the heck out of everybody, you can do cross-channel posting. So you can basically choose, and I don't know, I tried to figure out if there was a limit. I don't know. You can basically cross-post it in other teams and other channels, the exact same message. Once again, I'm not sure I would recommend that because generally people don't want it in a million different places.
Yeah.
If I don't know. Do you use that,
or have you seen other? I don't personally use it, but I think I've seen it being used where in a large team there might be several channels and there's overlap in some particular topic. So it's useful to use it then because you might be in one channel and possibly missed it in the other. So it's useful to do it in that respect, but certainly in a smaller team with less channels, it's less likely you're going to miss the message. So
and if there are cross-posted, it creates this these interlocked rings show up, and if you're the creator of it, and if you enabled editing of messages, we talked about that last time, so you can say, too bad you can't edit messages, but most of the time by default you can edit your own messages. So if you cross-posted it in 5 different channels and you noticed a mistake, any of the messages, if you edit it, it updates all of them. And you can also, when you edit it, you can also decide, oops, I didn't mean to put it in this channel, or I want to spam some more channels. So you can go and add it to more channels if that is important to you. And I think then the last drop down is kind of a moderation thing. Like you can say if everybody, by default, everybody can reply, or if only basically channel moderators. So, what I like is that set nobody as a channel moderator, and then ask a question, and then nobody can reply. So it's just okay, if I don't hear anything, I'll just assume that my answer is correct. What do you guys think? And then say nobody can reply. So I don't know. But so those are some of the other options. I don't know. There's a whole host of things across bullets and lists and stuff. Are any of the ones I typically never even go there, right? But
I don't use a lot of them, but because I'm often working with customers and I'm sharing PowerShell snippets, I'll use the code snippet one because it makes it easier to indent and send the PowerShell. And then obviously it makes it easier for my customer to copy and paste this code snippet into a PowerShell window. So I tend to use that. Sometimes if I'm typing meeting notes up, I'll use the bullets. I like to format my. Just the formatting options are actually quite nice. So for me, it's more about formatting and structuring a message so that it's easier to read and conveys my message better.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, and then, we were talking about, you click on the create new conversation, and Microsoft worked to make that pretty explicit because, a new conversation is really what it sounds like, a new conversation. So a new topic, and then typically people reply to that. And then if you're starting a new conversation, and that's that whole, so you end up with a threaded discussion. But in one-on-one and group chats, things work a little bit different. So there's, you get many of the same formatting options, but it's not a threaded discussion. And then a few things are a little bit different. So in a one-on-one chat, you've got that exclamation mark, but when you click on it, you actually get more options. So standard, but then you get important, which is like what happens in a channel. But then there's another option you can really use to annoy your friends and coworkers, because if you, one of the things you can set it to urgent, and then it keeps notifying that person every 2 minutes or up to 20 minutes. So if I really want to bug Dino, I could, come on, Dino, I need that now. And then you mark it as urgent and it keeps notifying. I haven't done that ever in
I never
the real
use
world.
it. Yeah. I mean, I guess in the healthcare setting,
Yeah, that's what
where you
Microsoft
need
talks
right,
about.
where you need to reach someone urgently, then that's what that should be reserved for. I would, or if you wish it on your worst enemy, I guess.
But then they can
but
do it back to you. So it's like it
yeah.
just and
So
speaking of notifications, so that's that's one way. But another important thing, is these whole app mentions. So if I just say in a channel, like you could be a member of hundreds of channels. So if I just say, hey Dino, here's a really important thing that I came across and think you should take a look at, the chance of you coming across it in all the channels that you're part of, I mean, it's pretty low. So, this is really where that app mentions. And if instead I say, hey, at Dino, and then it shows the people matching, and I pick Dino Caputo, then you get a note, you get a specific notification that somebody at mentioned you. And then you can do that for individuals, but you can also do it for, kind of groups as well. So maybe talk about that.
yeah, so certainly at mentioning a person brings it to top of their list for them to see, so you for sure know that they'll get that message. I like that feature. I use it a lot.
Yeah.
Because it shows up in your activity feed as well. So then when you're checking to see what's new, you'll see that someone had mentioned you. You'll also see it called out in a different way in the channel. So it's quite obvious.
So that's okay. So that's at mentioning an individual, but Dino, maybe walk people through how you can like notify other groups.
Certainly. So, I like to use the at mention of a person. I use that often because it calls attention to them. It puts the message in their activity feed. So the likelihood of them seeing it is very high. And like as following with that, you can at mention a channel or a team as well. So if you at mention your channel, it calls more attention to that message. So it's similar, kind of is similar to an announcement, but it just highlights the message when you mention the channel. It makes sure that everybody in the channel is notified, so it shows up in their activity feed.
Right.
And then lastly, you can mention the entire team as well. I would say exercise that with caution. If it's a large team with multiple channels that not everyone is following every channel, then you may not want to use the at team mention, so I would say err on the side of caution and just use the person and channel ones. But if there's some announcement that for sure everyone needs to see or is important to every member of the team, then you can use the at team mention.
Right. And I know we talked about it in the previous episode. If you don't want, because you have big teams or big channels, if you don't want people to do that at mentioning, that's one of the things we mentioned, that you could turn off at mentions.
Turn it off. Yep.
Right. So, and that probably you may want to turn it off or control it if you have big teams, right? So, I talked about, I wanted to talk about a few things that I think are a little bit of gotchas, at least sometimes for me, but I think for other people as well. I talked about how, you can just like type something and then just press enter, and it most often sends the message. There's a couple of things, so if you click on that icon, that airplane to the far right, it always sends the message. But if you, for instance, like type a message and then like put a bulleted list, then if you press enter and you don't pay attention, at that point, it just actually adds another blank line because you're kind of it's more of a formatted message. So one of the things you can always, if you're using the keyboard, you can always do control enter. Control enter always sends the message. So that's important to know. And then another thing that like I know that I sometimes do is if you click the little paperclip to attach a file, so it's like, so here a message, and I want to say, hey, here's the latest spreadsheet. So I click that, I upload the spreadsheet, and then it shows up there, but you do still have to send the message, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it seem like it's done because it's like uploaded. But so if you are paying attention and you go over to something else, that wasn't sent. So
I think that's one area where Microsoft can improve that experience. I mean, I'll admit that I sometimes have done that myself, where you upload and you're doing multiple things and you forget to hit send. So
yeah,
especially when you're perhaps in a meeting context and you're chatting with somebody and you pop it in there and they're like still waiting for it. So make sure you hit send when you do that.
Yeah, or control.
But I do like the fact that you can do bulleted lists and things like that. So it really is like you're editing, in a document or in Word. So once you get used to that, I think it's quite powerful.
Yeah, and if you ever want to add a line, like, you can do that, the shift enter, right? So if you want to do a multi-line thing without doing a bullet list, you can do shift enter, right?
Sure.
So that's, there's lots of keyboard shortcuts. I think it's like, is it Windows period or Control period, or anyway, something brings up the list, and we may talk about those, but there's a million keyboard shortcuts in Teams. It's like the Microsoft thing. Let's make it be as many shortcuts as we can think of. It's like it's more than a page. It scrolls when you bring it up. So there's a couple other things you can do with messages. You can react to them, so you can like, heart, say you're sad or angry. I haven't done that. I'll have to wait till you send me a message, ask me to do something, and I'm going to say I'm going to use the angry. But and then what other things? Oh, and then and then there's the ellipse, the three dots, which often bring up a million more options. So what other interesting options are there when you click on that?
Yeah, you'll get a list of a bunch of different options that appear, but like obviously you can, if you need to edit your message, that would show up in there.
Yeah.
Save this message I like. So if there was an important snippet of a conversation you were having with someone that you wanted to refer back to, you can save it, and then days or weeks later you can look at your saved list and it'll take you back to that point in the conversation. So that's a useful feature. You can do things like shared Outlook, access the immersive reader if you have, impediments that you want the immersive reader to come and read a message to you, make the text bigger, so which is very nice.
Yeah.
You can pin messages as well, which cause the message. You see a little green pin in the corner of the message. It pins it for everybody so that yet another way to call, notification to a message.
Right.
And then you can outright turn off notifications just for a message as well if there's a long running thread, that you just don't want to get bombarded with notifications on. So
yeah, because typically, like if I post something and then I get notified by default of replies to that. So like in a large group setting, if people are going, great idea, Kevin, or in your case, if it's like bad idea, Dino, right? You probably get tired of all those people saying that's a really bad idea, Dino. So then you turn off the conversation notification. Right. You can tell you use that often.
Yeah.
So.
I choose to not be notified for any messages.
Any negative. That's what they should do, is like, like the sentiment analysis. Like, I'm okay if people are giving me good messages, but if they're asking me to do something, I think that's maybe on the roadmap for the future AI, but that's not there. So don't go looking for that option today. So I think that is a good, synopsis, and we hit on, if you use all of these with discretion, I really do think you can become marvelous. What did I say? It's like you can, I can't remember, but anyway, it started with M's, but you can do some marvelous, masterful messaging.
And meaningful.
Oh, meaningful too. Well, that's,
yes, don't forget that.
Content does matter. You can format it, but you got to actually have some good content. So I think with that will bring us to the end of this episode of Turbocharging Teams. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you learned some things that you can use as you create your own marvelous, masterful messages. Thank you.